Images from Ukrainian military officials purport to show Ukrainian paratroopers taking out 2 Russian tanks with Javelin missile systems. The images appear to show one tank after it had been hit, and a second one being destroyed. It is currently unclear where exactly the images were filmed, but they were obtained from the command of the assault troops of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, who said in a statement on Wednesday, "Soldiers of the 80th Separate Assault Brigade of the Air Assault Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine destroyed 2 modern Russian T-90 Vladimir tanks with a Javelin anti-aircraft missile system." The statement added, "We continue to perform combat missions and destroy Russian invaders. Death to the Russian occupiers." They signed off with the now famous slogan, "Slava Ukraini," which means glory to Ukraine. Zenger News contacted Russian and Ukrainian officials for comment, but had not received a reply at the time of writing. Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24 in what the Kremlin is calling a special military operation to liberate the Donbass. Thursday marks the 113th day of the invasion. In related news, French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, and Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi arrived in Kyiv on Thursday for talks. They are reportedly hoping to rebuke what has been perceived as their lukewarm support for Ukraine. Meanwhile, Washington has told China it risks ending up on the wrong side of history following Chinese President Xi Jinping's assurances to Russian President Vladimir Putin that Beijing supports Russian sovereignty. Thousands of civilians remain trapped in the key eastern Ukrainian city of Severodonetsk, where the water supply is reported to be dwindling. Hundreds of civilians are taking shelter in the bunkers beneath the city's Azot chemical plant. Luhansk Oblast Governor Serhiy Haidai said earlier this week that all 3 bridges into Severodonetsk had been destroyed, making delivering supplies and evacuating civilians impossible. President Joe Biden has promised Kyiv another $1 billion in security assistance and weapons, and General Mark Milley, who chairs the Joint Chiefs of Staff, says Russia has lost around 20 to 30% of its armored force during the ongoing invasion. In the updated Russian combat losses, Ukrainians' MOD announced that around 200 more soldiers from Russia were killed by Ukrainian forces on Wednesday, June 15. This has seen the number of Russian soldiers who have lost their lives fighting in the conflict rise to around 32,950. Another 9 Russian tanks were also destroyed by Ukrainian forces on Wednesday, June 15. According to Ukraine's military update on Russia's combat losses since February 24. 17 armored personnel carriers, APCs, from Russia were also destroyed, as well as 9 more vehicles and fuel tanks. The other significant increase in figures is the loss of Russian artillery systems and MLRS, which have risen by 7 and 3 respectively. This takes the number destroyed by the Ukrainian army to 729 and 233. The General Staff of Armed Forces of Ukraine revealed that Putin's army had suffered the greatest losses on Wednesday, June 15, in the Bakhmut direction. A detailed breakdown of the 113th day of the war also shows that the loss of the 17 Russian APCs now means Ukraine has destroyed 3,545 in total since the beginning of the conflict, while the destruction of 9 more Russian tanks means that Putin's army has now lost 1,449 in total. Ukraine also reported that they had destroyed 9 more Russian vehicles and fuel tanks, taking the total destroyed by Ukrainian forces to 2,494. In the war's early weeks, Russia scattered its forces, attacking multiple objectives at once and failing to capture Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. Russia then refocused, withdrawing some forces and placing heavier emphasis on the eastern Donbass region. Milley, President Biden's top military advisor, told NPR that Russia has massed greater numbers of combat units, as well as more artillery than the local defenders have. At the time of the interview on Wednesday, Milley was visiting NATO headquarters in Brussels. He was meeting officials from allied nations to coordinate their efforts to make the math problem work out. Ukrainians have been urging the US and its allies to supply more weapons than they already have, and they too are thinking of the math problem. The math is clear. Ukrainian President Advisor Mikhailo Podolyak told NPR's Greg Meyer this week, "We will need a parity of weapons if we're going to be effective in any sort of counteroffensive.